Good morning from Shivani Scientific and team of Shivani Scientific to Wonderful this Sunday morning. And we are about to start our webinar for today, that is Minutes to Disaster, Impending Cryotank Failure. As more and more people are joining, we will wait for another 5 minutes or maybe 7 minutes before we start. Until that time, I would request Dr. Keshav to run our corporate video so that we can just spend this 2-3 minutes watching these videos. Yeah, Dr. Keshav.
Shivani Scientific is a leading Indian company in assisted reproductive technologies. With an experience spreading over a period of 4 decades, Shivani exports products to nearly 43 countries world over. At Shivani, we innovate, we create, and strive constantly towards betterment and improvement in ART. Our pathway to progress has registered a phenomenal progress over 4 decades. From being marketing partners to manufacturing our own IVF brands, we strive to attain proficiency in enhancing multiple parameters, all of which lead towards optimization of conception. Innovations in gadgetry have peaked to new levels, and our gadgets like Spermfuge have had over 1,000 installations worldwide. Motivation coupled with innovation is our driving force, which has been responsible for winning the trust of our clients and making us one of the trusted names in the IVF industry. Our indigenously designed gadget LabCare, the first of its kind in the world, being accredited with 2 US patents and with 17 more patents being filed internationally, all bear testimony to the ongoing innovations. Our relentless efforts targeted towards improving pregnancy rates have helped us gain recognition as an in-house R&D center by DSIR of Government of India. Our specialization in turnkey projects for IVF lab setups, OT rooms and CSST all comply with international regulatory standards. Our brand leadership in IVF segment has grown with Kethan, Fornax, Wonder Sperm and eArt. All have been patronized and recognized by satisfied clients worldwide for their quality and efficiency. Our business is albeit about technology, but is also aimed towards forging a strong, long-lasting customer bond. Forging ahead with the rapid advances in the field of technology and medicine, we too are motivated to revolutionize the field of ART, all targeted to have a lasting impression.
Good morning once again, those who have joined just now. We are all set to start our webinar on Minutes to Disaster, Impending Cryotank Failure by Dr. Keshav Malhotra and presented by Shivani. However, we are just waiting for another 5 minutes for more people to join. And meanwhile, we will see our second video just to, it is only 2 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Keshav. Good morning once again. And I would once again wish good morning to all of you, those who have joined just now. And I also thank the people who have joined much earlier. And so we will wait for this last video to run, another one video, and then we will start. So please bear with me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Too many things to track in your lab? Missing out on important alerts? Worried about safeguarding gametes? We understand how critical it is for you to ensure real-time tracking and monitoring of activities. Presenting new generation LabCare, an idea based on IoT. LabCare is a dedicated app to track, monitor and record all the data in real time. LabCare keeps log of CO2, temperature, humidity and all parameters in the incubators with instant alerts to user via call, SMS and email. Lab Health keeps the log of lab's vital parameters like CO2 level for safety of lab technicians, temperatures, humidity, VOC, power supply and altitude. It also gives instant alerts to user via call, SMS, email and buzzer. CryoSense tracks the level of liquid nitrogen. ColdSense monitors temperatures in refrigerator. FreeSense keeps log of temperature in deep freezer. DoeSense keeps the user updated if lab door or incubator door is not accidentally left open. It also gives instant alerts to user via call, SMS, email and buzzer. LabCare app is designed to monitor all IVF lab parameters. LabCare app provides freedom to embryologists and helps live life stress-free.
Yeah, good morning once again to all of you, and we will start now. I will introduce to the topic and then I will introduce Dr. Keshav to all of you, and after that Dr. Keshav will start. In last maybe 5 to 7 years, our vitrification has gone up by 5x, and we have seen that there are many commercial medias available in the market, and all medias are performing very well, especially Kitazato and Cryotech media, and not to forget Vitrolife and a lot of other medias which has contributed in expanding the vitrification practice into our IVF and ERT field. Of course, when this vitrification has gone up, also our cryo depository has gone up, but we have hardly given any special attention to the cryo tanks, which we are supposed to maintain under the different agreements with patient for maybe 10 years or 5 years or 15 years. And the clinic or the embryologist and or both clinic clinicians and embryologists are responsible for maintaining this cryo depository in a safe condition. So in our experience, we often used to hear sometime complaints, sometime remark. And recently, maybe 1 year back, we had a call from one of the East India customer, and she had lost all 3 of her cryo containers, and all samples were gone when she was shifting her clinic from one city to another city. Now, we were not aware that this was happening, and she started saying that why you didn't do and all that. So we mentioned that it is the clinic's responsibility, because cryotank manufacturer will give you only 6-month warranty and rest is in your hand. And then she said, why you didn't do anything? Why you didn't teach our staff, and why you didn't, said that it is so important. And that made us a wake-up call, and we thought that yes, as a company, we are responsible to educate and to find solution to the problems faced by our customers. And we did, our team of engineers did a lot of research, a lot of experiments, and we have came up with possible solution. But while doing so, we came across many facts, simple facts, complicated facts, and very many information, which we felt that we must share with all our customer. And that is why this webinar is there today. When we discussed with Dr. Keshav Malhotra, he was very willing. He said, yes, I also experienced similar things, and let us join hands together. So we did join hands with him, and we worked on this subject. And that is why this webinar has been now put in place. So this is, I will not take much time. This was a short description why we are doing this and why this name is that menace to disaster impending cryotank failure. They say that all cryotanks will fail. Only question is when. It is not that this cryotank will not fail. Any cryotank can fail. I would also like take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Keshav Malhotra. We all know him. He's a very avid learner, fast, very good speaker. He is a ISHRAE certified embryologist. He has done his master in clinical embryology from Monash University, and he is a director at Rainbow IVF and Meta. Meta is his brainchild, and he has just started last year. This is his own training academy, and I think it has taken off very nicely. So we wish all the best to him, and let us now hear from him. Thank you very much. Now over to Dr. Keshav.
Thank you, Ashish ji, for a very wonderful introduction and a very warm welcome to all of you present here today. Thank you so much for joining in for this very important and very crucial topic that we are going to discuss on today, which is impending cryotank failures. Before I begin, I just want to disclose that I don't have any financial obligations. I'm not associated with Shivani. I'm just doing this talk because this is very close to my heart. It's a very, very important topic. And I think in the wake of recent news that has come up from the West, where cryotanks have failed, I think this is something that all of us should really focus on and think about. So like I was telling you, there have been a lot of reports about cryotank failures in the news. And this was one which actually took a lot of highlight. So there were 2 cryotank failures which happened in a span of 24 hours. One happened in Cleveland, the other happened in Pacific Fertility Center. And this happened in a span of 24 hours where one, there was obviously a problem with the alarm system. And in the second one, there was a problem with the rise in temperature that happened, and almost about 4,000 eggs and embryos were completely ruined in this disaster. And these are things which we can't really control. So I have a news report from this cryotank failure. And basically, you have to understand that these cryotanks age. There are certain problems with them. There could be problems during transport. There could be problems in the vacuum seal. There could be problems with refilling, etc. And if we don't maintain them properly, they are bound to disaster. Now, like Mr. Modi was actually telling us at the moment, just a few seconds ago, that it's not a matter of why, but it's a matter of when. And we all have, this actually gives me nightmares, because now, if I look at my lab, I'm going to show you a few pictures of my cryotanks as well. And they have been with me for years now. And if I think about this scenario where I'm talking about when, it's going to give me a heart attack. I'm very, very sure about it. Right. So as soon as this disaster happened in America, it was all over the news. And what followed later were almost 70 lawsuits, which actually happened on Cleveland Clinic or University Hospital Cleveland Center, where basically now these patients are fighting against improper maintenance, lack of property, lack of loss of life, etc., etc. There are multiple lawsuits which have happened against the center. And what's happening now is that most of the clinics now have to obligate into providing better services of cryo maintenance, etc., etc. So these are things which now in America have to be mandatory, and soon I think in India this is also going to be the same case. Now, I was going through literature, and there are a lot of reports regarding the risks with cryopreservation. If I talk about this paper right here, which is from Matthew James Tomlinson and David Morrell, we basically talk about unsafe storage, improper handling of liquid nitrogen, potential injury during the handling process if they're not being maintained properly, equipment failure, and also when you're unable to handle emergencies. Now, these are all the causes that could lead to a catastrophic disaster. Even when I talk about COVID times, when we are actually stuck with coronavirus, if you remember the early phases of lockdown, like I'll share my experience with you. I think the first lockdown was announced somewhere around the 22nd of March when there was the Janta curfew. And then from probably 26th onwards, we had a major national lockdown. Now, I was lucky in the sense that I had nitrogen for at least 10 days in that period. Because when I called my nitrogen supplier, that guy actually told me that all the liquid nitrogen factories were shut during this period. Now, we were lucky because we had at least a 10-day buffer. But if I had not had that much nitrogen, it would actually have been a major heart attack scenario for me. But even after that, we in smaller cities do struggle with the supply of liquid nitrogen. And that is why it's very important that we consider the fact that emergencies can happen at any time. And a contingency plan during this emergency is actually very, very important to have. I was also going through a lot of surveys, and basically it has been mentioned that up to 11% of the industry partners have experienced calls from their suppliers or their consumers about tank failures. Now, there was a recent webinar on the same topic, which had about 100 participants, and I think we can also do this survey today. 24 out of 63 people who actually took part in that poll actually said that they had experienced a failure of the liquid nitrogen dry shipper. 11 of them said that they had experienced failure of the manual filling tank, and about 5 out of the 61 actually said that they had a problem with the auto filling tank. So these are common issues which actually happen in the current scenario. When I talk about failures, there is also an increased awareness about these failures. And there is an increased concern amongst patients because patients have access to all of these news articles. Patients have access to YouTube, they have access to Google, and they do a lot of research. Now, we might not think that they are not doing research. They wouldn't even worry about all of these scenarios. But I'm telling you that any patient that walks into your unit is aware about all of these issues. And it is our duty as embryologists and our duty as clinicians or lab directors or clinic directors here to actually give them a comprehensive understanding of how cryotanks work, how they can actually fail, and take a consent which actually details all of these issues so that they are aware that if such a scenario happens, it's the equipment that is liable and not the clinic. Now, there are a lot of concerns about storage. Most of the concerns actually range towards the administration side. So the administration of it, the consents, record keepings, documentation, all of these things, major important concerns. Then you also have concerns about the storage conditions, which include contamination problems, which include the liquid nitrogen itself, holding time, and also like the location of the units in cases of emergency. Some issues with maintenance and monitoring could be in the form of refilling of tanks. When you do the manual monitoring, I'll show you images of how to do the manual monitoring. Again, if you have a remote monitoring system in place, then how to actually go about that. There could be direct trauma to the lab personnel. It could be direct trauma to the equipment if the cryocan falls, etc. So these are all the issues that we actually have to worry about. Again, a very recent survey, and this actually states that almost 60% of ART specialists experience some kind of cryo tank failure or troubles with their cryo tanks. And like I'm telling you, it's not a matter of which cryo tank will fail. It's not a matter of how it will fail. It's not a matter of what will fail inside the cryo tank, but it's just a matter of when it will fail in the laboratory. And that is something that all of us really need to think about. So before I move into the topic, let's first understand the cryotanks itself. Now, cryotanks come in various shapes and sizes. They come in various capacities. Low capacity ones are 30 to 60 liters, but then you also have high capacity cryotanks, which could be 100 to 500 liters. Now, it's very important to actually know which kind of cryotank that you have in your laboratory. Important to physically inspect the cryotank. Now, when I was making this presentation and when I was actually discussing with Mr. Modi and his team, and also at this moment, I want to thank Dr. Parsuram Gopinath for his views and his real good inputs on this presentation. So we have to understand that we actually are not doing a lot of maintenance checks that we need to do. Now, physical inspection of the cryo tank is something that we don't really do in our laboratories. At least this is something that I and my laboratory was lacking till we started preparing this presentation. And it's important to actually check the neck of the cryo tank, check for dents, especially when the tanks go for refilling. Now, in our center, our unit is located on the 3rd floor. So the cryo tank and a big tanker of liquid nitrogen comes to actually refill the tanks. It's not those 100-liter cryo tanks which are coming into the laboratory. It's a huge tanker because we also have an automated filling system which is in place. So in these scenarios, the cryo tank has to travel to the ground floor, to the tanker, and that's the position where these cryo tanks are being filled. Now, if there is improper maintenance, the cryo tank can fall, it can have dents, and these are things that each embryologist should be noticing in their clinics. Now, one more thing that we have to be noticing, and this is something that I'm going to talk to you in detail when I talk about the experiment that Shivani actually has done, is the ability of the tank to retain the liquid nitrogen levels. Now, this is something that can be easily monitored. This is something that we should be able to check. If our tank is not holding on to the levels as adequately as possible, this is something that can actually be an early warning sign into impending cryo tank failures. Autofill systems are also something that need to be checked. Now, once you have an autofill system in place, it doesn't mean that you don't have to check it. You have to actually check the levels. You have to check whether the alarm is working properly, whether the levels that are being displayed are proper or not. And again, this basically tells me that, so the failure that happened in America in the University Hospital Cleveland was an autofill tank where the alarm system was switched off by someone, which we don't even know about at the moment. So someone can sabotage, someone can switch off these alarm systems, or they can malfunction and switch off themselves. And that is why it's very important that even autofill systems have a manual maintenance. Now, this is a very frequently asked question to most of the embryologists here. And they basically ask, what kind of cryo tank should we prefer? Now, there is a lot of hearsay in the West about vapor phase storage systems when compared to our normal standard liquid nitrogen storage systems. And it's important to understand that the feasibility of using vapor phase or the feasibility of using even electric freezers in our country is quite difficult. And if you look at the cost effectiveness, if you look at the convenience, a normal standard liquid nitrogen tank is probably far superior. Now, vapor phase storage system does have its advantages as far as cross contamination is concerned, but this cross contamination is still a very hypothetical risk. And when you look at our current scenario where access to liquid nitrogen can be problematic, in a vapor phase storage system, liquid nitrogen levels have to be maintained to the point. Now, any small fluctuation will result in fluctuation of temperatures quite a bit. And that is why I really feel that in the current scenario, we should be actually focusing on standard liquid nitrogen storage tanks and how to actually improve their capabilities. Now, when you look at a cryo tank, I'm going to give you a cross section of it. You basically have the mouth of the cryo tank, you have the neck of the cryo tank, and then you have the inside of the cryo tank. Now, the inside of the cryo tank, if you cut it out, I have a video which shows all of this as well. So you will have a multi-layer insulation system, and then you will have the cryo tank or the canister or the inner vessel of the cryo tank proper. So most of the times, these insulation layers are the ones which get problematic at the moment, because once the cryo tank ages, it's the vacuum inside this insulation layer which actually fails. The other thing that can fail is basically an accident or a damage to the vacuum vessel. And again, that could also lead to a liquid nitrogen leak inside the container. So I found this video on YouTube. I'm going to just show it to you. Okay. So basically that is how a cryo tank looks like. So this is all the insulation material that you can actually see inside the cryo tank. They've taken the outer covering out of the cryo tank, and what this guy is going to do is he's going to take out layers and layers and layers of insulation material. So even when we talk about the size of the cryo tank, a 35-liter cryo tank looks really, 55-liter cryo tank looks really big, but what is inside is actually really small. So these are things that we can see. So I'm just going to fast forward it. So that's the amount of insulation that is there, and this is in the form of aluminium. It's in the form of absorbent. You also have charcoal, which is put inside some of these cryo cans to absorb moisture if that is forming inside. And that's the inner container of the cryo tank itself. And again, he's going to dissect and cut out the inner container or the inner chamber as well. I'm going to show, fast forward it to you. So they've actually created a layer, a dent inside, and that is basically how the inner container or the inner tank itself looks like. So this is basically how you dissect a cryo tank. Whenever we are actually making these cryo tanks, they are actually filled with, they're actually vacuum sealed. And this is a very important process which happens in whenever a cryo tank is being made. And most of the times it's the error of this vacuum seal that causes the catastrophe that happens in most laboratories. So if you can notice here, this is a vacuum aspirator. All of the gas which is inside, all of the air which is inside this insulation layer of the cryo tank is actually taken out, and so that you actually have a proper insulation. And this is how basically a cryo tank works. Basic failures of cryo tanks can actually be of two categories. First is evaporation of liquid nitrogen, and second is a failure of the vacuum seal. Now, evaporation of liquid nitrogen is basically a slower process, and in this scenario, you will have some time to actually correct these measures. But if you have a vacuum failure, it is a rather fast process, and in such scenarios, you may only have minutes to impending disaster. How do you identify, or what are the signs of cryo tank failures? Now, the first sign that one embryologist has to look when you talk about cryo tank failures is basically sweating outside the tank. Now, sweating looks like something like this. I'm just going to switch on my marker so I can actually show you. This is what sweating looks like, right? So if you have water droplets which are actually settling on the cryo tank itself, that is what sweating actually is. You might also have frosting, where you get small ice particles which are actually now start forming at the neck. And the neck of the cryo tank is something which is the most vulnerable at this position. So try and identify these issues at the neck of the cryo tank. And also you will probably have ice formation which might start happening on the tank itself. So these are three important things that an embryologist has to look at. There are a lot of reasons for cryo tank failure. Most of the times it can be attributed to staff complacency, because if our staff is not paying as much attention to detail as possible, and if they are like a little lazy with their cryo tanks, or if they're a little bit careless with their cryo tanks, an error is bound to happen. The second important scenario is basically aging of the cryo tanks. Now, if I talk about, I was having a discussion with Mr. Modi yesterday, and he was basically telling me that most of these cryo tanks only come with a 1-year warranty. And there are some which actually come with only a 60-day warranty, and post that they will not take any of the errors as their fault. So when I look at these warranty periods, and if it's only 60 days, or even if it's a 1-year warranty, it is not sufficient, because these cryo tanks actually are put in IVF units for years on such. And that actually basically tells me that we have to start monitoring our cryo tanks more carefully in order to prevent any kind of disaster. Dropping of the cryo tank, banging of the cryo tanks to each other, like frequently moving the cryo tanks is problematic. And also one thing which we don't really bother about much is when we are refilling these cryo tanks, then if you're splashing liquid nitrogen on the neck of the cryo tank, that can also damage the vacuum port of the cryo tank. So you always have to use those funnels in order to fill these cryo tanks, because all of these really help you in improving the life and the expectancy of your cryo tanks. Now, most of the times liquid nitrogen, how we maintain liquid nitrogen cryo tanks is by actually taking the level of the cryo tank, or should we actually be looking at the temperature? So This is data which is actually coming in from a lot of studies now. And Shivani's also done a lot of studies on this, which I'm going to talk about. When you're taking a level, if you're doing it manually, you have to use a scale and you have to dip it inside the cryo tank and you take it out, and then you will see moisture which will form or frosting which will form on the scale itself. That's actually going to tell you about the levels of liquid nitrogen inside your cryo tank. When you take the temperature, there is a probe that goes inside the cryo tank and that takes the temperature. Now, this temperature would probably not be as accurate as possible, because even if there is less amount of liquid nitrogen. Now I'll go back to when I was trying to explain you about vapor phase liquid nitrogen storage systems. They actually have to maintain a very small level of liquid nitrogen to maintain the temperature of about 176 degrees inside the cryo tank. And even if the level falls, the temperature will actually take a longer time to fall. And this is one thing which all of us have to understand. So probably measuring the levels is something which is very important. I'm going to come to an experiment that these guys at Shivani actually did, and they are very, very innovative. Honestly speaking, I've not seen an Indian company being so innovative as Shivani is. So they actually took cryo tanks and they drilled holes, one inside the cryo tank and one from inside to outside and one only on the outside of the cryo tank, to actually see the fluctuations in the temperature and the levels of the liquid nitrogen inside the cryo tank. And these are actually images from their experiment. This was done at Shivani's state-of-the-art laboratory, which is there in Mumbai. And I'm really hoping that they can restart very, very soon. So if you notice, a tiny hole was drilled on the inner of the cryo tank. And this is what they actually saw. So when we are talking about just the vacuum breaking, you can actually see that this is the point where the vacuum actually was lost. And you see that there is a sharp dip in the outside temperature of the cryo tank. So if I draw a cryo tank right here, and if there is a hole which has been made, the outside, if there is a probe which measures the outside temperature, that will be the first thing to actually fall. When you look at the liquid nitrogen which is present now, which is depicted by this line right here, or the gray line right here, even after the vacuum was broken, you still had about, so this was almost an hour's time. If I notice here, you have at least an hour till the liquid nitrogen drops, and then it drops drastically. So this is a very beautiful, this is a very fantastic experiment which actually tells us about how vacuum seals can actually interfere or actually change the dynamics of the cryo tank, and how much time we actually have in order to prevent a disaster. So if I go by this experiment, we can say that we have up to an hour's time if the hole that these guys made was what happens to your laboratory. But in most of the centers that are there in India, it might not be an induced hole that you're creating inside the cryo tank. It might be a very small fracture or a hairline fracture of the vacuum seal, which from where the disaster actually begins with. So if you now notice, or if you go back to your laboratory, start taking the manual temperatures, or at least start feeling the temperatures of the cryo tanks itself, and they should be at room temperature. If you can afford to actually buy a probe system, that probably would be the best case scenario in this situation. This data is in concordance with data which is coming from the West as well, and that's from Peter Nag's group. And basically, they've also come up with a similar data where they have found out that it's the outside temperature that falls first, and then you also have temperature inside the liquid nitrogen tank which will fall. But their data actually tells us that if you're measuring the temperature of the inside of the cryo can, that is something which might not be the most adequate method to actually maintain your cryo tank. So it's the outside temperature that actually holds more values, followed by the levels of the liquid nitrogen, followed by the inside temperature. So after this, let's come to probably the last part of this presentation before we initiate the discussion. And these are going to be practical considerations that we have to actually now start implementing in most of our ART laboratories. Now, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is administration and consents. Now, whenever we are cryo storing, and vitrification is become so common these days, it's actually become a norm in all IVF laboratories, and the intensity and the quantity of the amount of vitrification that we're doing in laboratories is only increasing. So you have to start taking consents, and when you're taking in consents, you have to actually inform about all the storage devices that you have. You have to inform them that they can fail even after following the most strict quality management practices that you have in the laboratory. And it's always good practice to not keep all your eggs in the same basket. So if there are multiple straws that you're freezing for the patient, try and divide them amongst your cryo cans so that if one cryo tank fails, you probably have a backup for your patient in another separate cryo tank. ASRM also came up with guidelines regarding storage, and this was an ethics committee opinion which came out in 2013. Basically talks about the responsibilities of the patient. Now, whenever we're talking about cryo storage, there has to be an agreement which has to be in place regarding the storage facility, payment of the fees of the storage or the maintenance fee, negotiate new storage agreements again if the cost increases or your quality management devices or equipment in the lab increases. Always update the current contact information of all of your patients. So this is also something which is very important, because especially in our country, and even if I look at my laboratory as such, I have embryos in storage from 2001. And now I don't have contacts of these patients, and there are still some embryos which are there in storage, and I can't discard these embryos without calling the patient and getting a consent for discarding. So this is a very problematic situation for me. Now, I don't even know if their addresses are correct because it's been so long. It's 19 years since we have these embryos in storage. So it's very important that we start maintaining the current contacts information, and this is something that you can do on a yearly basis, and that might actually help you in maintaining the documentation for all of the samples that you're freezing in your cryo tanks. And if there is a failure to respond to storage communication, always tell your patients that there might be consequences to it. So you might put it into your consent that this maintenance contract lasts for about a year, this maintenance contract lasts for 6 months, etc., etc. So these things are things that you can actually put into your consents. All your records have to be consistent and have to be complete, because traceability is something that we cannot be complacent about. So try and maintain good cryopreservation records. Electronic cryopreservation records are what is actually probably beneficial. But even with electronic records, you have to worry about the privacy and the safety of these records. So have a good firewall system, have a good antivirus system, have backups of all of these records in place. Now, whenever you're cryo storing, a double witnessing protocol is something which is mandatory. And like I mentioned to you, storage in multiple cans is something which is advisable rather than storing in one particular device. I'm not going to talk about this much because our main focus is on the failure, but labeling of the cryo tanks with at least like 3 identification markers on the sleeves, and also the canister should be labeled with a unique number, and the can should also be labeled. These are things that you can think about. When you are storing these cryo tanks, and this is very important, always use the right capacity cryo tank. Now, there might be a worry amongst clinics that they might opt for a very large tank for very small quantity of samples, or a very small tank for a very large quantity of samples. And this actually is problematic. So always choose the right capacity based on the number of sleeves that you're vitrifying. Always think about the maintenance challenges that happen. So I always prefer that we have a liquid nitrogen tank instead of a vapor phase tank. Now, location of these units should also be very, very planned. And they should be planned in such a way that if a disaster happens, if there is a fire which breaks out in the laboratory, there should always be an escape route for these cryo tanks so that you can safely evacuate these cryo tanks. And I think there are reports in news where people have actually lost embryos by not having proper evacuation plans as well. And always keep documentation evidence of maintenance and monitoring of these cryotanks, because if a legal issue happens, it is your documentation and the kind of steps that you're taking to actually prevent these failures that's actually going to safeguard you from any lawsuit. Nothing else will save you. So these are things that you have to consider. Now, the area that you're putting the cryotank in, obviously you should it should be visible to the staff. It should be accessible to the staff. It should be very well ventilated. You should be monitoring the oxygen levels inside this area. Should have easy access to liquid nitrogen supply delivery as well as removal. And again, should not be very cluttered so that there is no damage to the cryotanks that are actually present in that room. So always try and actually dedicate one separate room for your cryotanks, which is very well ventilated. Emergency plans, we have to assume that all tanks will fail one day. And this is one statement that gave me nightmares. And I have not been able to sleep since last night, because if I think of this scenario, I am in a lot of stress because I have a lot of embryos which are in store in my units all over the north of India. So it's very important that you actually follow the manufacturer's recommendations for calibration, maintain the levels, monitor the levels very, very well. Oxygen sensors is something which is very important. So when I was actually doing my master's in Australia, they took a lecture for us on cryo safety. And I remember they showed us a news clip. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a slide for it, but they showed us a news clip from Australia itself. And they actually showed us documented evidence where 2 embryologists died because of a liquid nitrogen leak inside the laboratory. Now, whenever liquid nitrogen leaks, we have to understand that liquid nitrogen expands to 300 times of nitrogen air. So 1 liter of liquid nitrogen becomes 300 liters of nitrogen gas. And when there is a major leak inside the laboratory, all the oxygen will get depleted. And you will have hypoxia, you could have anoxia, and you could even die in such situations. So what happened in this scenario was one person had anoxia and collapsed. The other person went to save that person, did not realize that it was a liquid nitrogen leak and an oxygen hypoxic situation in that condition. And he also collapsed, and both of them actually passed away. So these are important things that you could consider, and always have SOPs in place. Now, the most important part of this presentation is actually monitoring of these cryotanks. Now, monitoring of the cryotanks can be done manually, or they can be done in an automatic way. I'm going to talk about both these scenarios. Now, when we talk about manual monitoring of the cryotanks, we tend to follow a 3 to 4 day protocol where within 3 days or 4 days, an embryologist is taking is refilling the tanks. Levels of the liquid nitrogen tanks have to be checked each and every day. And I will emphasize this again and again, because a leak can happen anytime. So you should be measuring, if you're doing it manually, you should be measuring the levels each and every day and not do it after 3 or 4 days. Always look for those signs which I was mentioning to you earlier, like sweating on the tank, like frosting, like ice formation, any dents, etc., which have happened during refilling, etc. These are things that you should be considering. This is a slide which I wanted to show all of you, and this is how you can actually measure the levels of the cryo tank. So you dip a scale, a 50 centimeter scale inside your cryo tank, take it out, and you will actually see that there is some kind of moisture, or there is some kind of frosting which occurs on the cryo tank, and this is on the scale itself. And this will tell you the level of the nitrogen which is present in your cryo tank. So this is one very easy way of measuring the levels, but obviously not as accurate as the other ways are. Now, there are 5 important things which happen, and this is basically the life of the cryo tank, or the lives of the cryo tank. And again, thank you to Dr. Parsuram for this slide. 5 things that you have to look for: leakage, you have to look for ice formation, you have to look for frosting, you have to look for evaporation, and you have to look for any sounds that the cryo tank is making. Sounds can be in the form of hissing, jackhammering, like clicking noises, or something where you can actually notice that something is breaking apart inside the cryo tank. So these are 5 important things that you should be considering when you're actually looking after the maintenance of the cryo tank. whenever I talk about maintenance of the cryo tank, always ensure that you are in the right PPE for actually maintaining the cryo tank, and that includes a cryo safety apron, it includes gloves, it includes a face shield, and it also includes covered shoes. So these are 4 or 5 important things that you should be maintaining, and all of these are available. And like I showed you, this is a very important alarm system that you should be putting in your laboratories. That's the oxygen alarm system, which is included in most of our laboratories, because this is very, very important as far as the health of the embryologist is concerned. So this is still, these are stills from my laboratory and our cryo storage unit. And you can see that I have multiple cryo tanks. I also have the big K10 system, which is right here, which holds most of my embryos. And there are so many cryo tanks which actually are in the laboratory. And when the lockdown happened, you can imagine the kind of situation that I was in. And I'm sure all of you also were in such situations, because it was a very stressful period. Now, I did talk about manual monitoring. So let's now switch to the remote monitoring systems that are available. So remote monitoring systems can be either in the form of an internal monitoring system, which I told you measures the temperature of the cryo tank, or it can also be the external monitoring system where you can actually look at the outside temperatures, etc., and just document it. Now, when I talk about remote monitoring systems, what's the major advantage of these remote monitoring systems is that they give you alarms or they give you alerts, and these alerts can come to your telephone, can come to your emails, can come to you by SMS, and you actually can have a very fast response once you have a remote alarm that comes to you. If I am doing manual checks, if the nitrogen tank failed late in the night, which is a common scenario, when I go by Murphy's law, anything which is bound to happen will happen, and it will happen at the worst possible moment. So most of these problems or happen during the night or late in the night. If there are any gynecologists here, you would actually relate to this, because most of the deliveries will also happen late in the night. So this is again something that we can relate to. So if you get an alarm on your mobile system in the night, you can actually take corrective actions and you can actually prevent disaster. And that is one of the major advantages of having a remote alarm system in the laboratory. And the best benefit of this remote alarm system is that this alarm does not go to one person, it goes to multiple people. So in my unit, when we tried this QC system by Shivani, the alarm system first went to my senior embryologist. If that embryologist has not responded within 5 minutes, then the alarm came to me. If I have not responded within those 5 minutes, the alarm went to 3 more people after that. So you can actually customize it according to your needs. And that's the major benefit of having electronic systems in place. This is how the system looks like. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. So basically what you can do is, so this system actually is for your cryo tanks, as well as for your cryo labs, as well as for your refrigerator. So it's going to give you readings for all of these. Now, the system has a probe which goes inside the cryo tank, which will measure the levels of liquid nitrogen. And it also has a probe on the surface of the cryo tank, which you can see with a patch here, or you can see on images right here. And they will tell you about the surface temperature of the cryo tank. And like I mentioned to you earlier, when we were talking about that experiment, whenever there is a vacuum break, which is the most catastrophic situation as far as the cryo tank is concerned, it is the outside temperature that will fall first. And these patches, which are maintaining the outside temperature, will trigger an alarm for you immediately. And you will actually you could take corrective action, because in this situation, like I mentioned to you, you probably have about 30 minutes to 45 minutes to even sometimes an hour, depending on the size of the failure, to take this corrective action. So if you get an alarm, I think you will be able to actually handle the situation much better. We were talking about this module with Mr. Modi, I think 2 weeks ago. And I was also questioning him, and I'm sure you will also have questions, because when we're putting a patch on the surface, there could be issues with an air conditioning system that are there, or the room temperature conditions that are there. So it's always important to understand that when you have a cryo tank in place, it will actually be at room temperature. When there is a vacuum failure, if you actually remember the graph, that the temperature will fall from room temperature to almost to about 5 degrees or even lesser. And this kind of fluctuation can never happen with your conditioners which are there in the laboratory, etc., etc. And the life of these sensors is also quite good. They are robust temperature sensors, which I think should be probably mandatory. If it's up to me, it should be mandatory in all the laboratories which are there. And I've already mentioned this to you. You will get alerts on your telephones, on your mobile, in forms of SMSs as well as emails from the system. There is also an app which is actually for this software itself. And this software is not just a cryo software. It's a software to actually monitor the QC for the whole laboratory. So you can actually have QC for your incubators, for VOC, for air quality, etc., etc. And you have a wonderful app which actually gives you access to all the information that's happening in your laboratory at the palm of your hand. So these are things that you can actually do with the kind of technology that's available to us now. And you can actually see multiple crucial parameters in one go. You can actually see historical trends. You have data logs of all the fluctuations that happen, and everything happens on one app. So that's something which I give kudos to Shivani about. We've already talked about the alarm response. I'm just going to skip because we want to take a lot of questions in the end. I'm just going to tell you that there are risks when you handle liquid nitrogen, especially if you are facing a disaster and you're working in a frantic situation and you want to shift the components from one tank to the other. Always remember that you have to wear cryo accessories because the life of the embryologist is also something that you are liable for, and you can't lose out on that precious life because of lack of access to these cryo accessories. Last few issues, I was talking a little bit about cross-contamination. And when I tell you a little bit about cross-contamination, now obviously this is a hypothetical risk which exists, but it can be eliminated using closed systems which are in place. And closed systems like the ones which are available from Cryotech, CBS, RapidEye from Vitrolife, etc. All of these can be used to actually, if you want to minimize. But there is an increased cost, there is an increased labor time, there are certain safety concerns that have to be taken into consideration. And that is why I would recommend that if you're not trained in handling a closed system, first get that training and then only move forward to basically managing or shifting towards closed systems. Most important is actually your staff and staff complacency. And this is something that I want all of you to develop SOPs for. When to check the cryo tanks, how often to check the cryo tanks, what are the points that you have to look for. If you have checklists or if you have SOPs in place, this is something that will help a lot of you. Our Prime Minister recently came up with this slogan, and he is a mastermind in making slogans, and this is vocal for local and local to global. And this is something that I feel that it's a responsibility for all us Indians who are out there to actually portray. And that's why I've included this slide. There are a lot of systems which are there in the world, but I've actually seen all of these systems myself. I have seen the Cryo Sentinel system. I've seen Tomorrow at ASRM. But when I compare it to our local system, which is developed by Shivani, I actually can't. There are no comparisons. This system which has been developed is far superior, is giving you far superior information. And I really feel that we have to take this slogan forward and we have to propagate our own systems to the world in this current scenario. Last slide. This is on the worth of a cryo tank. And again, thanks to Mr. Modi for this slide. Now, this is something that we don't really think about. And I think we should all start thinking about these situations. Now, let's say that we have one sample which is in our cryo tank. To produce this one sample, let's say this is a sample from an IVF cycle. So that patient has probably spent about 1 lakh rupees or maximum of about $2,000 for the worth of medications, hormones, consumables, and the kind of media that you have in the laboratory. This is one sample. Now, one sample would have taken at least 15 hours of the clinician, 10 hours of the embryologist time. And obviously we have no value for time at the moment, but this is the amount of time that you're spending on producing one good sample. Indirect resources for that one single sample, let's say in the form of maintenance or in the form of like your consents, administration resources, etc., etc. Let's keep it at a value of 25,000. Now, if you have for one single sample which is in your cryo tank, you are approximately spending about 1.5 lakh rupees. And if you have about 100 samples inside your cryo tank, it actually values to about 1.5 CR worth of property which is there inside your cryo tank. And that is the value of your cryo tank. Now, if I buy a BMW or if I buy I hope I can buy one day a Bugatti or a Maserati, which can value to 1.5 CRs, I would take utmost care of that car. But do we take the same amount of care for our cryo tanks? I'll leave that question to all of you. Last few take-home messages for all of you, and I think then we can open for discussion. Always assume that all cryo tanks will fail. Always measure the liquid nitrogen levels. If you can't afford these systems, at least do it manually. It's best practice to actually start thinking about wireless alarm systems. And there are local systems which are available in the country now. Strengthen your SOPs. This is the best time to make your SOPs because we are free right now. We still have about a week's time till the lockdown ends. And then we start initiating our practices back. So this is ample enough time to actually make your SOPs, make your new consents, and always have an emergency plan in place. So with this, thank you so much for your patient listening. And I am very open to questions now, and I will be joined by Mr. Modi and Team Shivani Scientific, and we will be answering your questions at this very moment. So please type in questions in the chat bar, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Keshav, for a wonderful presentation and very candid talk. And we will be opening the questions now. Mr. Mohit is there, who is moderating the questions and remarks. So Mohit, can you listen to me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So can you just first read the remarks, what you have received, and then we can move to the question.
Yeah. So, yeah, everyone is first of all very happy with the last slide. Like they have been made aware of the value of the cryo tanks because of that last slide.
Thanks to Ashmudi ji.
So this, and yeah, everyone is saying that the presentation was very well, and basically it has been an eye opener for them in terms of the value of the cryo room, the cryo tank, and also how important the monitoring of the entire cryo process is. So yeah, that's about the cost. So can we take the questions now?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Right. So there are a couple of questions here from Dr. Nirbhika Singh. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first question is, why are there no large-scale cryo storage facilities like what are seen in the US, for example, Reprotech, which are so why are there no such facilities in India as yet?
Fantastic question. And I really think that this is a wonderful opportunity to actually make these large storage facilities. But the kind of problem that I see in our country is that our country is too vast, and these cryo storage facilities probably might open in metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. But what happens to those smaller centers that are there in the cities? Because obviously a lot of investment has to be made. And the second important thing which I feel about these cryo storage facilities, now I probably will not be very, very comfortable with them, because when I have these cryo tanks in front of me and I can monitor them every single day, because these are precious embryos that I am creating myself and these are my patients. So I want to give them the best kind of care. And when I actually do the monitoring myself, or if it's my team who's monitoring the facility itself, I will be probably more comfortable. But like you've mentioned, US has it, Europe has it, and this could be a very good business venture if Shivani wants to step into it.
No.
I don't know.
I will just add here. I would means we are not looking at that, but I think there is another issue is the logistic and transport, because logistically moving this cryo sample in a safe containers or a liquid nitrogen charged containers is again big challenge in our country. Number one, and number two is education of patient. Like if you have kept your cryo depository at some other place, the other IVF clinic can tell your patient कि आपका sample तो कहीं और पे रखते हैं, हम तो इधर ही रखते हैं. So the patient doesn't immediately gets diverted or carried away with this kind of false information. So patient has to get educated. In US patient, if you tell him that your sample is safe somewhere in cryobank, he says, okay, that's no problem. But if you tell someone here that your sample is away 500 kilometers and not in my clinic, that patient himself can be, having a wrong impression or can be taken for a ride by someone else that, no, ye to galat ho raha hai. So I think it's some time to go. Maybe another 5-10 years, we might have this kind of, banks. Mohit, next question.
Yeah. So the next question by Dr. Nirvika is, do you think the coronavirus can be a transmission concern with liquid nitrogen? Or to put it better, could it be a culprit in the contamination of the whole tank? And secondly, how about transmission of coronavirus in dry shippers?
Okay, thank you, Nirvika, for that wonderful question. I actually did a live session on a similar topic yesterday on our Meta page on Facebook. And I was talking to Dean Morbeck yesterday. Now, if I go about by logic, and hear me out here because I might disagree with a lot of viewers who are actually present in this session. If I go by logic, the only cases, and even by literature, the only cases that are demonstrating the presence of the virus inside semen samples or inside follicular fluid, obviously there have been no studies, but inside semen samples are very extreme cases, are very sick patients. And these patients would never come into an IVF clinic or give a sample to you because they are already on in the ICUs, they're on ventilators, etc., and people are actually checking whether the testes is exhibiting the virus or not. So first question here is that would these patients be actually coming inside your clinic? And the chances are that this is a very negligible risk. Now, the second thing when I talk about cross-contamination is that it is still a hypothetical risk. There have been no reported instances of any bacterial transmission or viral transmission happening from one sample to the other inside a cryotank. So it's still a very hypothetical risk. It's a very good question. And the best that we can do in such a scenario is probably use a closed system if we are adept with it. I would not really recommend just taking a separate tank at the moment because there is no data to suggest it. But if you're managing it inside a closed system, probably that would be the best. But there is no evidence at the moment. So I hope that answers your question. And even in those dry shippers, obviously the risk of contamination is less because there's probably the chamber is actually filled with liquid nitrogen and charged with liquid nitrogen, and they're not in contact with your samples. So in such a scenario, like vapor phase, the hypothetical risk is less, but you can't use a dry shipper only lasts for about a maximum of about 3 days or maybe a little more. So in such situations, probably you can't really use them for storage. You can just use them for shipping, but it's something which can't be advised for storage. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, Mohit, next question.
Yeah. So Dr. Sonal has a question here. Usually in a clinical setup, all the cryocans are usually near full. So in the case a particular can fails, how can you save samples in that particular situation?
I just missed the first part. They're usually in what position? I'm sorry.
In a busy center, cryocans are normally full, most of them.
Yes.
So in such a situation, if a can fails, how are the samples to be saved in an SOS basis?
Thank you, Sonal, for that question. Again, a very good question. Now, in such a situation, like I showed you my laboratory as well, there are so many cryo cans and most of them are full, but we always have at least 2 or maybe even we have about 3 cryo cans which are used for your maintenance. So they are always filled with liquid nitrogen, but they're only for maintenance. So there will be no samples within those 3 tanks. And I would always advise that you should have a spare of at least 2 tanks in your laboratory if you are in a busy center, or at least 1 big tank in a smaller center. And this maintenance tank can be used in emergency situations for your storage if you're trying to transfer from one can to the other.
I think I will add something
so
that
the next question
might
is
be,
by-
Mohit, go in.
No, please, sir, you finish up.
So the question was how you can save. So if you have a warning system which gives you an advance warning, so you have maybe 2 hours, maybe 5 hours, maybe 10 hours, depending on the damage your tank has. And then you can come in and shift the samples into another can as in the backup tank, as Dr. Keshav said.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you should have an early warning either by manual checking or by automated warning, or whichever may be the case. So idea is to have some time in advance so that you are in a position and you are sure that yes, my samples are in a good condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mohit.
Yeah. So the next question is by Dr. Jaideep Malhotra. What is the right capacity or ideal capacity for cryo cans? Does it depend on the number of straws or cryo devices?
Absolutely true. And it also depends on your vitrification system that you have in your laboratory, the amount of patients that you're actually doing cryopreservation for. And I always advise that, okay, so we have 35-liter tanks, which are the most common ones. But most of the times in smaller centers, people will only buy a 35-liter tank, or they buy a 55-liter tank. And they'll keep their semen samples also inside the same tank. They'll keep their embryos also in the same tank. They can keep the eggs also in the same tank. So my advice to all of these clinics which I work with is always to have a separate tank for semen samples. This could be in the form of a 35-liter tank, which should be sufficient. I'm not sure. It also depends on the number of semen samples that you're freezing. So it depends on how many cases that you're doing. For embryos, a 55-liter tank, I really prefer having like 35 to 40 liters, but a 55 jumbo tank could also be preferred in these situations. And I would always advise to have another small tank for your oocytes as well. So you have at least a segregated amount. And in case one tank fails, there is still space in the others where you could actually accommodate these samples. So this could also be a good scenario. Again, like I mentioned, these are 3 tanks, another 2 for your maintenance. So I would really advise to have 5 tanks, and this would make a lot of companies happy, but that's the advice that I have for the viewers here.
I will just add that the bigger the tank you have is a more safety, but then, and so that your number of filling is less. So say in jumbo tank, you will have say 50 liter. So you will have the refilling will come every 10 days or every 7 days, where in a smaller tank, the refilling will come more often. Moreover, the bigger tank will have some sort of, inertia for you to have a safety. Just in case something is happening to the tank, then the evaporation of 50 liter or 40 liter of liquid nitrogen will take some time, where evaporation of 10 liter or 12 liter will be much faster. So the bigger tank always gives you, but also it comes with the risk that because the tank is bigger, you try to put more samples into it. And the more samples you keep, you are at more risk. So ideally, you should have less number of sample per tank rather than having, so your average number of sample per tank should be less than the very high number per tank.
Yeah.
So that is what I would just add here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah, Mohit.
Yeah. So the next question is by Nentara Lucien. How do we monitor the outside temperature of the can, especially when the lab has a functional AC?
Okay, Nentara, I did mention this in the presentation as well. I'll just go back to it. So you can actually, you have these manuals, your sensors, which can be put on the surface of the cryo tank, like I showed to you. And we are very lucky that we have a local system which can be implemented in this current scenario. Sensor goes on the surface of the cryo tank, which gives you real-time readings of the temperatures of the cryo tanks. And that is one way of monitoring. The second way, which is not the best way, is just by touching the cryo tank and seeing whether the temperature is falling or not. But be very careful in this scenario, because if the cryo tank has failed and the temperature is very low, frostbites can occur. And again, I would not advise this. So always try and move towards having remote monitoring systems. And now the second part of this question was, how is the air conditioning going to affect these sensors? These sensors are very robust. And like I mentioned, if there is a failure in the cryo tank, the temperature will be, there will be a massive drop. It will not be going from 24 degrees to 20 degrees or something like that. It will be a drop from 24 to maybe, let's say, 5 degrees or lesser. And this massive drop can easily be recorded in these robust sensors that are available to us. So again, I hope that answers your question. Mr. Modi, if there's any technicality that I've missed.
Yeah. So Dr. Keshav was very much on the spot, but I will just add that our system has an algorithm that if there is a change of weather, suppose you do not have air conditioner and you are in Agra or say Jaisalmer, or where suddenly evening temperatures drop suddenly from ambient temperature of say 35 to 24 in the night, then our systems are, algorithms are set. They will calculate the average drop per minute and they will compare with the drop of the liquid nitrogen behavior, and then they will give you an alarm. So our algorithm is built in to make sure that any change in ambient is taken care by way of different algorithms.
Yeah, and it is the time of artificial intelligence, automation, and all of these algorithms. They're coming everywhere. And in the near future, this is how IVF is going to happen. So kudos to you to actually implement them in the quality management systems as well.
Yeah.
Mohit, next question.
Yeah. So you mentioned about strengthening SOPs for the cryo program. So can you highlight some key points which are absolutely necessary in the SOP?
So like I mentioned to you, I don't know who asked this question, but like I mentioned to you, always now put it in writing how many times the cryo tank has to be filled. What is the correct procedure to maintain or monitor the levels inside your cryo tank? So if you're doing it by the scale, how it has to be done, so that if there is any, now whenever you're making an SOP, it has to be in such a way that even if a lay person reads it, he should be able to understand it. So that is how you should be actually writing your SOPs. So manual monitoring of the levels, how it has to be done. Like I mentioned, how to do the refilling, because even when you're splashing liquid nitrogen on the neck, that could also be problematic. So a funnel has to be used. This has to be mentioned in your SOPs. Again, the frequency of monitoring, frequency of auditing, etc., etc. All of these things should be mentioned in your SOPs. And this is the best time to write them.
Yeah, Mohit, next question.
So the next question is by Anita West. What should be the temperature of the surrounding area, meaning the cryo room, especially in summers?
Very good question. Very good question, Dr. Anita, and thank you for that. Now, it's always mentioned that your cryo room should be at ambient room temperature. And when I talk about ambient room temperature, it's around 24 to 26 degrees, and that should be the temperature of the room. But apart from temperature, now this is just one important factor. Apart from this, you should have good ventilation in that room. It should not be a closed room. We have actually put an exhaust system in place in that room. We have an air conditioning unit also in place, because in Agra, the summers can go up to 50 degrees and it can really affect the temperatures of the rooms. So we try and maintain a 24 to 26 degree temperature with adequate ventilation inside the cryo room. And these are two important points that you should consider.
Right, so the next question is by Trisha Mishra. So this is a problem which they had recently faced, where the cryocan cap was stuck onto the lid. So there was no way to remove it. So she's asking, how can we handle these kinds of problems?
Risha, I hope you've been able to solve this issue, because this is another problem that can actually be because of ice formation, and it could be one of the early signs of an impending failure. because if the the cap of the cryo can sticks, most common reason is the ice. Second common reason is that you've actually twisted and put it inside, and it's actually because there are grooves for those canisters if you actually notice inside your cryo can. So if you put it in a twisted position, or if they're not in the grooves, it might be difficult. One more important thing that I learned in my master's was that when you accidentally twist the cap of the cryo can, you actually break the insulating seal, and that causes ice formation on the rods of the canister, which could lead to your cap sticking to the cryo can, and could also lead to frostbite if you touch the canister by your bare hand. So always understand that this is one of the most early signs, and I hope this was not the case in your scenario, but these are things that you should be now noticing in the laboratory.
Thank you, sir. The
Next question
is by Aradhana Gupta. What should be the minimum safe level of liquid nitrogen in both large and small containers?
Very good question, Dr. Aradhana. This actually depends on the capacity of the liquid nitrogen tank. It is said that the safest level of liquid nitrogen is just below the neck of the liquid nitrogen cryo tank. So try and keep it at that level, and that is the safest level. Most of us, what we tend to do is just fill on top of the cryo cans, and liquid nitrogen actually comes out from the mouth, and then we actually stop filling. Understand that when this liquid nitrogen is coming out, it is going to the neck, which is the most critical component of the cryo tank, which is the most easiest to get damaged, and this liquid nitrogen will fluctuate temperatures and break that vacuum. So keeping it below the neck is what is the most ideal for your cryo tank. You can always measure the lengths of your cryo tank using that scale that I mentioned earlier, and then try and maintain it at that level, because it is obviously different for different capacities of cryo tanks.
The next question is by Dr. Tara. Who is legally responsible in case of a cryo tank failure?
Very good question.
Very good.
We don't have any such instances from India where I can actually quote who is legally responsible, but I'll go back to the American incident that happened. Now, in this American failure, where almost I think there were 200 patients, embryos, eggs, which were affected. 70 of them filed a lawsuit on the hospital, and the hospital filed a lawsuit on the manufacturer. So obviously no one is safe, but you are in the direct fire line of the patient. You are responsible for their gametes, etc. So the first lawsuit that will happen is, or which will happen to you. And that is why you have to safeguard yourselves in the form of taking consent, in the form of explaining that these equipments are bound to fail, and in the form of actually showing to the courts that you have taken adequate precautions. You have monitored the levels daily, monitored the temperature, you have changed your tanks frequently, taken precautions while refilling, etc., etc., because that is the only way that you can safeguard yourselves. The liabilities will be on the clinic, and the clinic can also probably shift the liability to the manufacturer, but that will not work because a manufacturer's guarantee is only for a year, and there are some which have only a 60-day warranty. So, and you sign that. So probably it ends up on the clinic and they would be responsible. So I hope we actually change our consent after this presentation and write all of these things down in our consents so that we are more legally safe in the current scenario.
I will just add two perspectives to this topic. First is that we all of have ISO 9001 as our this thing. In that 4.2 or 4.3 clause is the customer property. That when a company has a customer's property, they have to be taken in more, precaution or more care to be taken. So when you are having a gametes of your patient who is your customer, then you are more responsible. I would say the most responsibility is on the customer property. Means if your property goes waste is not a problem, but customer property should be taken care. Secondly, if I compare with the airline industry, that when we are flying, like yesterday we have a Pakistan airline and
Yeah.
100 people died. So they all have a consent that plane might fail. Even when we start, they start explaining that यदि अगर plane को उतरना पड़ा तो ये करना, whatever. So you can also explore the angle of insurance, that if something happens, then can the clinic get the money or patient get the money, and can the insurance company can insure your cryo tanks?
Yeah.
And if that happens, I don't know, anybody has explored that option.
We've
But
not. It's very good
but
point.
we should explore the insurance point, that like the airline offers us or a credit card company offers us that if something happens to you in a airline crash, your family will get this much or XYZ. So can we have a cover of insurance that can be explored?
Okay. Very good point. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Mohit, next point.
Yeah, Dr. Mizanur Rahman and Dr. Diksha Sharma have questions on the cleaning
Okay.
in terms of firstly how to clean and secondly how often to clean the cryo tanks.
Very good question. And I think I have mentioned this in a few of my presentations at ISAR and at ACE, that cryo tanks have to be cleaned. Now, the dilemma is how to clean them and when to clean them, because once they are actually full of your liquid nitrogen and full of your samples, it becomes very difficult to take all the samples out, shift them to another cryo tank, then clean it. The ideal way of cleaning, which is mentioned in literature, is just soap and water, and then you let the cryo tank dry out, and then you start refilling it again with liquid nitrogen. That's the ideal way of doing it. But I am very sure and that nobody does this in the industry, because it is a very tedious process. The newer things that are coming up for maintaining sterility of liquid nitrogen tanks is basically UV sterilization of liquid nitrogen. And I think that came out about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, if I'm very sure. And this can also be implemented. But again, what we are doing is just taking the nitrogen out or putting in fresh sterilized liquid nitrogen into a cryo tank. And once the cryo samples are actually affected by any kind of viruses, hypothetically, if they're affected by any kind of viruses, it's already there inside the cryo tank. You can't take it out. So like I mentioned, the hypothetical risk of cross-contamination, this is probably also a hypothetical issue where we can't really do much about it. Also, one more thing that we have to consider is the suppliers of liquid nitrogen, that who's getting the liquid nitrogen, how is he bringing that liquid nitrogen into the unit. None of these can be the most sterile at the moment. And that is why we have to go by literature where it says that, okay, it's fine, it's just a hypothetical risk. In order to minimize this hypothetical risk, maybe use a closed system if you're very worried about your patients. But even open systems, there have been no reports of any instances with sterility of liquid nitrogen. And that is something that I want to emphasize upon in this webinar.
So the next
Good,
question
Dr.
is by Dr. Parshuram Gopinath. What is your experience with transport cryo cans and with shifting samples from one center to another?
Hi, Parsu, and again, thank you for your inputs in this presentation. They've actually helped me quite a bit. Now, my experience has been very limited with transport cryo cans. And the maximum that I have done is maybe transport from our Delhi center to our Agra center, or our Agra center to our Lucknow center. That is the maximum that I've done. And these are journeys which can be made in a car. And we've used our cryo cans to actually transport them. I have spoken to some people, especially when these conferences are being organized, where eggs have to be shipped for workshops or embryos have to be shipped for workshops. And in such situations, there have been instances where the embryos have actually gone for a toss because of these shippers. So in these instances, just quoting these instances, I am not very comfortable using them. And I would always recommend that if a patient has to shift the embryos from one center to the other, it is the patient's responsibility to actually do it safely, because I will not take that liability upon myself. Even if there are embryos which are coming up from one center to the other, we get a consent which is signed at our center that the patient is responsible for getting the embryos in the correct manner possible. because these shippers have their own risks which are associated with them. We tell them about all of these risks, and the patient signs on it, the other clinic signs on it, we also sign on it. So again, my only takeaway point here would be to put your consents in place and document each and everything that you've told this to the patient, so that if any liability happens in the end, you have made sure that you inform the patient about it. That will be my only instance. I don't have much experience in this issue.
I will just add my observation or experience that we all know that all the IVF clinics have a supply of frozen semen
Yeah.
from various semen banks. Now, I have seen that they travel in a train or a car with the small cryo can in the hand, and they come and deliver frozen semen sample to you. That's the one way, but I don't think in a Western world the traveling in train or car is allowed with liquid nitrogen. That is number one. Number two, MV company has IATA certified dry shippers, which are to be charged with liquid nitrogen, and they will give you about 3 to 5 days, depending upon how much charging you are doing.
Yeah.
And then you can ship it very, with the guarantee that it will reach in the correct space. So you need to look for IATA certified dry shippers, which all the UPS, DHL companies will take. India do have now a lot of specialized logistic companies who take refrigerated or cryo refrigerated cargo, and the standardization of logistic is happening in India in a very fast terms. So now we have at least 5 companies who specialize in this cargo. So you can explore, or we can send you the details of few companies, and then you can keep it. But you also will have to buy the dry shipper, which is certified by courier companies and IATA, who will carry this shipper anywhere across the India or across cross border. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So Dr. Ashok Patel here is asking, as the time goes by, if the liquid nitrogen appears yellowish, what could be the cause of this?
Okay, again, thank you, Ashok, for that question. It's a good question. Could be because of the kind of liquid nitrogen that is coming into your clinic. Could be because of dust accumulating inside the cryo tank. Could be because of ice particles which accumulate and then thaw back and then accumulate again. There are multiple reasons where your liquid nitrogen color, it won't be very yellow, but it would be the tinge will change. Obviously, liquid nitrogen is a colorless liquid and it should be colorless. And if all of these things are happening, you should be cleaning the cryo tank. So that's something that I would advise. I've already mentioned how to clean it. It's just simple soap and water, and then you let it dry out so that all the water is gone, and then only charge it again with fresh liquid nitrogen. Also tell your supplier. Now, I actually got this a similar query, I think last year, where one person actually said that when they were refilling the cryo tank, some leaves and branches came out of that cryo tank and fell into his cryo tank. So this was a very bizarre scenario which occurred. But we have to understand that India is a country where such precautions at distributor level and manufacturer level are less as compared to the West. So your suppliers, the kind of environment that they're filling the maintenance cryo tank in, etc., these are things, Ashok, that I would want you to check, and always try and ensure that the safest protocols are maintained and there's no dust, etc., which is actually filling in these points. That's pretty much it.
I will add one point,
Sure.
that these tanks are manufactured by welding, and
Yeah.
welding is done by an inert material, which is another material than this thing. So many times this weld material also will give you some sort of particle release. But when you are cleaning, as you said, you should also supervise or inspect this weld, that it has not opened, because this is very important. And then it can be a sign, or it can be a good stage at where you are actually cleaning, and you can also observe the welding.
Yeah.
If you see from top putting some light inside, you could see the welds also inside and see the integrity of the weld.
Okay, so again, a very good point by Mr. Modi here is to actually inspect the cryo tank, especially when you're trying to clean it up, and see for all of these points. Mohit, we can take the next question.
Yeah. So the next question is again by Dr. Nirvika Singh. basically related to the storage of infectious and positive, potentially infectious samples. So should there be a separate cryo can for these, cryo storage for these?
Very good question, Dr. Nirvika, and thank you for that. It like I'm emphasizing on this again and again that this is a hypothetical risk, but we cannot take a liability of a patient having cross contamination inside our units, and that is why it is always recommended that you have separate cryo tanks for HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, VDRL, etc. Now, if I go on labeling all of these contaminated cryo tanks, you probably will need 6 or 7 just for these infected samples. And that is why, again, practically, it might not be the most doable scenario, but at least one good cryo tank for only your infected samples should be maintained in each of the laboratory. But if you can try and actually have the viral infections and the bacterial infections separate from each other. So that would be my advice to you. One very good way of eliminating this is using a closed system. And again, I'm emphasizing on it that a closed system is a guarantee that cross-contamination will not happen. And that's also something that could be implemented in your units.
Yeah, Mohit, next question.
Yeah, so Dr. Faizullah and Dr. Sonal have a question here that with these remote monitoring systems, is there any risk of exposure of electromagnetic radiation or something like that for the embryo?
Okay, again, very good question, Dr. Faizullah and Dr. Sonal. Now, when we talk about these electromagnetic radiations, especially from Wi-Fi, I have faced these questions so much because we have a witnessing system in the laboratory and it also has electromagnetic radiations, but all of these have been deemed safe with a lot of trials on mouse embryos and also trials on human embryos. So this is something that we don't have to worry about. Second thing, this Wi-Fi that is there, even if you don't have a sensor in your unit, the Wi-Fi radiation will still exist in the building itself. And so that's something that if you're very worried about electromagnetic radiations, you will have to switch off Wi-Fi's for the building, etc., which again will not be possible. If you go into literature, there is no added risk. There are a lot of mouse embryo trials which are existing at the moment. And I don't see this as a criteria to be like frantic about in the current situation.
Yeah, Mohit, next question.
Yeah. So the next question is, in the near future, when we start IVF cycles,
yeah,
and if there are reports of virus infections in follicular fluid or semen, will we be shifting to vapor phase freezing or vapor phase storage?
We don't know.
What extra precautions should we take?
Okay, I've read that question, Mohit. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We don't know that whether we'll be completely shifting to vapor phase because vapor phase has a lot of issues, has a lot of risks. And yesterday only I was speaking to Mr. Modi. We spoke for almost 1 hour. And this topic took about 15 minutes of those 1 hour, that 1 hour conversation. I don't really like vapor phase storage systems because the level of nitrogen on the temperatures actually fluctuates quite a bit if you don't maintain it well. And that is one of the reasons why I don't think that this will be a scenario. Maybe if this scenario happens, we might have to put separate cryo tanks for these virally contaminated patients. But I don't see vapor phase taking over the Indian scenario at the moment. And even if it takes over, then it will be a very big headache for embryologists. That is what I feel.
Can we move on to the next?
Yeah, next question.
Yeah, the next question is by Anita Vase. If the cryo device falls inside the cryo tank,
yeah,
then what is the procedure to get it out?
Very good question. It has happened to me. It has happened to me. And the only way of taking it out is to actually empty your cryo tanks completely. So what we did was we took out the canisters, we placed it in a thermocol box which had liquid nitrogen in it. Then we took a very large thermocol box which had the capacity of actually holding 35 to 40 liters of liquid nitrogen, and then just completely emptied the whole cryo tank, shaking it a bit so that the seed falls down. We were very lucky that it fell down. But again, the best advice that I want to give here is to avoid these issues. And only way of avoiding these issues is that when you actually are storing the cryo canes inside the goblet, always put another goblet on top so that that goblet doesn't come out of that cryo cane itself. So that is one way. People also put semen vials and they'll just put it right at the top of the goblet, the cryocane, so that the cryocane cannot escape. If you're putting in multiple these devices in one single goblet, try to tighten them by maybe inserting a little bit of cotton, etc., which will hold these cryo devices in place. And these are certain things that you can actually do. But if this happens to you, the only way of doing it is by just putting everything out into one big thermocol container.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
So
to
there are
know.
a couple of questions by
Yeah.
Nentara Lucian again.
Yeah.
The first one is about explaining consent to somebody who can't read or write or something like that.
Very good question. It's a little off topic, but I'll be happy to answer this. When you have a patient who is unable to decipher what's written in the consents, then a guardian who is able to make the patient understand these things, or someone who's willing to take responsibility is what is advocated. Always take a legal opinion in such a scenario about your consents. The second thing that I would like to advise here is that all your consents should be in a local language, because a lot of people, if your consents are in English and it has a lot of technical jargon which is present on these consents, any patient will actually face difficulties in understanding these consents. So try and have a dual language consent where you have it in English as well as in Hindi, which might make it easier for the patient to understand. And it's not just Hindi; it could be Kannada, Telugu, Marathi, etc., depending on your state and what you feel would be more comfortable for your patient. So these are two things that I would advise in such a scenario.
And the second question is, can the culture testing of the can be done pre or post cleaning?
Okay, again, this is a very good question, and thank you, Nentara, for it. When I went through literature, they actually took swabs from liquid nitrogen itself, rubbed it on culture plates, and then they observed growth on those culture plates. And they actually found out that, and this is Ludovico Parmigiani's group from Italy, they found out that only when your liquid nitrogen was sterilized using UV, that was the only situation when there was no growth on the culture plates. In all other situations, there was heavy growth on the culture plates with bacteria. They could isolate viruses from it, they could isolate fungus from it. And this study actually gave us a lot of insight and actually made us a lot more worried about cross contamination. But again, we have to take into consideration that there is a bias which is associated in the study, because that scientist has actually devised the first liquid nitrogen sterilizer for the world. So a parliamentary studies to actually prove this point. Second thing that we have to understand is that there have been no instances in literature where cross-contamination has happened. So these are 2 points which also have to be taken into consideration apart from the cultures that have been actually done.
Yeah, Mohit.
Now we move on to the last couple of questions. The first is by Dr. Hussain. What is the maximum lifespan of cryo cans, and when do we replace them?
Okay, thank you for that question. I will put my views on it, but I think Mr. Modi is going to be better at handling this question. My views are basically that the life of the cryo tank depends on the maintenance of the cryo tank and how you're maintaining it properly. I can't suggest that a cryo tank will last for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, etc. But whenever you see signs of aging, whenever you see that your capacity of holding liquid nitrogen is falling down, I would suggest that that's the time when you would want to replace the cryo tank. Ashish ji, if you have views on this.
Yeah. Usually, the maximum lifespan is between 10 to 15 years, but usable working life could be 5 to 10 years, depending upon how you use. But as Dr. Keshav mentioned, that if you can measure the static holding time on a regular basis, that would be a fantastic early sign. Like we have early sign in so many diseases. Like this is a, if you can measure that when we measure the average of our car, and if you are how many liquid nitrogen you are filling in, and how fast it is you to get in. So, like for example, I decide to fill every Monday, and this Monday I fill 10 liters, next Monday 10. But on the after 2 years, it has started giving me 12 liters I have to put in, or I have to put in 14 liters between that 7 day frequency. That is a indication that your holding static holding time is going less and less. And when you feel replace that container. Now it can happen that it can be in a good condition if your handling is good. So if you have alarm system and if you are measuring static holding time of your tank, and if that is within the limit, then you can go up to 10 years or even 12 years should not be a problem.
Yeah.
But these devices should be there. So, and this care should be taken so that you are aware that if something is going to go wrong, you are knowing it early, well in time to save your samples.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mohit.
Thank you, sir. And the last question is by Dr. Mizanur Rahman,
Yeah.
which is which disinfectant and at what concentration can it be used for cleaning the cryotank?
Okay, I went through a lot of literature on this when I was preparing for the consensus on embryology that we did last year. First general point that came out in the consensus was that it is not recommended at the moment to clean the cryotanks because it's a very tedious process. Second point that emerged out of the consensus was that if you're cleaning it, soap and water are good enough. So you don't really need very strong concentrations of disinfectants, etc. Just common soap and water is sufficient. Only care that you have to take is that it should be cleaned properly. Soap should be eliminated from the cryotank, and the water should be completely dry before you refill your cryotanks with liquid nitrogen. So this is the only advice that I have for you, Dr. Mizanur, and I hope that answers your query.
Yeah, Mohit, any questions left now?
No. With that, we've come to the end of the Q&A
Yeah, so I
session.
will
I'd hand over
make the concluding remark. I would thank Dr. Keshav Malhotra for his enthusiastic response and interest into this topic, and presenting a very wonderful webinar on this topic. Secondly, I would like to thank entire Shivani team, including QKL team, ER team, and our marketing team, to develop this warning system which we have developed, and also to share all the data which we got from various experiments. And also I would like to thank Mr. Sumit and his team for holding this webinar on Sunday. And I will also like to inform all of you that we have another webinar coming up on next Sunday, that is on a cost efficient management of upcoming IVF center in a post-COVID era. And it will be presented by Dr. Keshav Malhotra, Dr. Jaydeep Malhotra, Dr. Narendra Malhotra, and Dr. Niharika. So I would like also, we will be sending you the registration link. So all of you who are interested, and we would like you to join on this webinar. Again, it's a very interesting topic, that in the post-COVID era, when patients will be, at the lower scale, and also there is increased, competition between the IVF clinics. So there is a lot of pressure on a cost side of the management, and how do we do a cost sufficient management without compromising the quality of the care to the patient. That topic would be touched by our speakers. And thank you once again to all of you for joining this wonderful Sunday, and we look forward to see you again on next Sunday. Thank you very much.
Last comment. Thank you, Ashish ji and team Shivani Scientific, for actually inviting me to present on this very important topic. And both these Modis are very, very important to the country, our Prime Minister as well as Ashish ji, because the kind of innovation that these companies are doing, this company specifically is doing in the field of IVF, is remarkable. And I'm sure there's a lot more that's going to come from Shivani for the Indian IVF industry in the near future. So
No, that
thank
is
you.
for sure. But I will have to disclose that we have no relationship with
We have
Prime
no
Minister
relationship,
Modi.
just
We have no
personal
relation.
friendship and remarkable respect for each other.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you very much for your kind words. And we look forward to next Sunday. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for joining us from this Sunday. And we look forward for better, post-COVID era. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.